A six-story building in Brooklyn, brick, built in 1932, elevator, 12 apartments. 1.5 million such buildings have supported New York's middle class for 90 years. Now fast forward the tape by 10 years. The same building. The light bulb in the hallway hasn't worked for 3 months. The elevator has been broken since the fall before last. There are stains on the ceiling of the third floor. The roof is leaking, but nobody is fixing the roof. In one of the apartments lives an elderly woman who has lived here for 40 years and pays the same rent she paid in 1926. And her son, daughter, and nephew from Quincy and a young family who just arrived from Tel Aviv or Tehran, they can't find an apartment in this city for any amount of money. I've seen this building before. I've lived in a building like that. Only it wasn't in Brooklyn, but in a city called Leningrad. And there are such buildings in East Berlin and in Havana and in Bucharest. And today I'll tell you exactly how the mayor of New York is planning to turn the capital of the world into the very thing I personally left at the end of 1973, beginning of 1974. I'll put 2 columns of text in front of you. On the left are the words of Zakran Mamdani, literally from his press release from 1926. And on the right are the words of housing officials from East Berlin in 1973. Thank God it has been preserved in written form, and you will be amazed at how much they match. In New York, about 1 million apartments are under so-called rent stabilization. That's half of the entire rental housing market, the 5 boroughs as they call them there. Brooklyn, Queens, and so on. Bronx, Manhattan. That's half of the entire rental housing market. Stabilization applies to buildings with 6 or more apartments built before 1974. That's how they decided. Every year, the city commission sets the maximum percentage by which an owner can raise the rent when renewing the contract. So, officials decide how much money people living in the apartment can be charged. But what if that money isn't enough for repairs? All right, on May 9, 2026, this commission was appointed by Mamdani. Therefore, completely under his control, they voted for the so-called corridor from 0 to 2%. That is, they allow either 0. So it's not allowed, right? Or they allow someone 2, or they say, well, up to 2 at most. And the fact that inflation was, let's say, 5 doesn't matter. The final decision will be in June, right? He will most likely achieve 0. That's his promised freeze. 0 is a freeze. It sounds very humane, right? And that's exactly the problem. Listen to how he puts it himself. I'm not simplifying, I'm not exaggerating, I'm just quoting. Housing is a human right. In what sense is housing a human right? So you were walking, saw a house, and went inside. It's your right to live there now. How does that work? We protect working New Yorkers from the greed of corporate landlords. How? What did you say? We protect them. And how much does food cost? Do you also protect people from the greed of corporate food producers? And how much are plane tickets? Do you also protect people from the greed of corporate builders and airlines? Not a single family will be displaced from their neighborhood, so it doesn't matter if they pay or not. You bought a house, you took out a loan, you need to pay for it. You need to pay the janitor, you need to pay the painter, you need to pay the factory for what you owe. And then someone tells you, well, I'm not going to pay you. You should leave. I want someone else to pay me, but they say you can't. What else can you do? Affordable housing is a public good, not a market commodity. In what way? Then why did I build the house? And why did I buy it there for $3, $4, $5, $8, $100 million? For what? So that it would be a public good. If I want to donate, I donate. But if I invested in some business and it's my business, then how can you take away my ability to do anything with this business at all? To make money from it? And that's the end. The city is taking unprecedented measures to hold negligent owners accountable. So not only are you allowed to make a profit or fix the house, plant trees, and clean up, they'll take you to court even if you haven't made a profit or spent your own money. And if you don't have any, you wouldn't want to, right? You don't spend your own money to improve the lives of the residents. So it's complete nonsense, right? All right. Each of these suggestions sounds like mercy. This is exactly a political calculation. A policy whose first-order effect feels like kindness is a policy that people vote for. They are told, don't worry, whatever you do, even if you don't pay, you won't be evicted. Oh, don't worry, your rent won't be raised. Oh, don't worry, you won't be thrown out, and so on and so forth. But mercy, that's just on the surface. It's not the same as mercy in real life, across the system. Yes, the system is exactly what we need to analyze. Let's open the accounting book of that Brooklyn house, the one I asked you to imagine. So the rent is frozen. What does that mean? Nothing has changed, today, tomorrow, or the day after. Everything worldwide keeps getting more expensive. You don't have the right to raise it as a landlord, and you get very upset, or you're a resident who lives there and you're very happy that you're earning more at work, but you still pay the same amount for the house as before. Now, expenses. Property tax in New York increases every year by 3 to 6%. That is, New York doesn't say, we'll freeze it, they want to take more. Building insurance, an increase of 10 to 15% per year. After the year 2020. Fuel for heating. For heating, it's unstable, but usually there's an increase of 5 to 20%. Water and sewage, a 49% increase every year. So your expenses are rising dramatically. And you can't raise the rent, the superintendent's salary, the janitor, repair workers. A 35% increase is easy. Materials, boilers, roofing, electrical, plumbing, those are up 520%. With frozen rent, the real margin. Well, margin, right? The difference between what you get and what you have to spend. It shrinks dramatically. This reduces cash flow, and the owner is left with 3 options. Option 1. Well, postpone repairs for another year or two, not replace the boiler, which of course heats water poorly, but there's no money to replace it, patch the roof instead of replacing it. Because that costs next to nothing. Stretch the painting cycle from 3 to 7 years. This one theoretically should be done every 3 years, but that one, well, whatever. Let them scrape and paint, let them pick at it. We'll just paint it in 7 years. Don't fix leaks until they turn into a flood. The second option is to leave the market, to sell. At a reduced price to someone who has more lawyers and who expects to wait for a change in power. Now, the third option is to just abandon it. Just stop paying property tax. Wait until the city takes the building. Yes, that's exactly how South Bronx lost about 30,000 apartments in the 70s. 30,000 owners just disappeared, that's it. They vanished and all traces were covered up. Owners literally burned their houses down for the insurance, because the house turned from an asset into a liability. You have it, it doesn't bring you any profit, and you're constantly being asked for money. Come on, if you don't give, they'll squeeze you dry. Notice, none of these options actually improve the apartment. That is, the woman for whom this policy was supposedly created. Year 1 after the rent freeze, the tenants are celebrating. The freeze is working. The owners cover the difference from their reserves and postpone major projects. Not this year, but next year. If not next year, then in 3 years. Year 3, year 4. There are no more reserves. They're gone. Artificial intelligence answers calls about repairs. The hallway lights are on less often. The floors in the lobby are patched up. They are changing. Complaints to the city's housing agencies are increasing. It's the 5th year. The first wave of small owners is leaving. I'm not talking about corporations, against which Mamdani is leading his campaign. I'm talking about an immigrant family that owns a single 6-unit house in Sunset Park, about a Greek family in Astoria, about a Russian Jewish family in Sheepshead Bay. Who saved up for many years to buy that 3-unit house, whose rental income is the parents' retirement? They'll be the first to go. They don't have a legal department to navigate regulations. They don't have the scale to absorb a drop in margins. And who will take their place? Funds, vultures, specialists in distressed assets, people who buy at disaster prices. They squeeze out what's left in 5 years and leave. That's worse than that corporate scam, the one Mamdani was going to fight against. It's not better, it's worse for the residents. If you're interested in this kind of analysis, subscribe and hit the bell. I analyze this city, this country, and this moment in history almost every day. And for those who want to go deeper, there's a private section for $4 a month. There it's unfiltered. By the 6th or 7th year, New York will turn into what every city becomes after a long period of rent freeze. Huge blocks will just sit there. Half-ruined, dirty, stinking with prostitution, drug dealing, and police who don't want to go there. With stinking apartments. People who have lived there for 10, 15, 20 years don't move out because they pay a third of the rent compared to the surrounding area. But it's also impossible to live there. And then there's another group, people who came to the city to settle there, immigrants, people who moved there for work. They enter the unregulated market, which has shrunk because of the freeze. Because some of the housing turned into condominiums, some was converted for commercial use, and some just deteriorated. This is a shrinking market. It's pricier than before the freeze. Newcomers are paying for the discounts given to longtime residents. And besides, nothing is being built there, because they're afraid that as soon as you build something, boom, another Mamdani will come. And he'll say, oops, this building is also becoming rent-stabilized. Naturally, a black market appears. Key money, cash under the table for getting a rent-stabilized lease, illegal sublets, fake tenants on paper, forged vouchers. This isn't a theory, gentlemen. This is the documented history of New York in past years. This is today's Stockholm, where the wait for a stabilized apartment is 20 years Buenos Aires. Before Milei, of course, where after the freeze was introduced in 2020, the rental market shrank by 60%, and Milei canceled it in 1924. The market immediately rebounded. This is Bombay, where regulated buildings are physically collapsing, killing residents under the rubble. They collapse. Why? Because the owners have no money, there's no profit. That means there's no money to repair these buildings. By 2010, rent-stabilized housing in New York look approximately like this. The stabilized housing stock apparently degraded. Several thousand small buildings changed owners or were abandoned completely. New construction slowed down because normal investors factor risk into all future asset classes. The unregulated market is more expensive than it was before the freeze. Young New Yorkers and new immigrants are moving to Austin, Miami, Charlotte, Nashville, Raleigh, anywhere. Entire neighborhoods, especially working-class areas of the outer boroughs, seem to be declining. Look at Detroit. This is not a prophecy. This is arithmetic. It's happened 100 times before. Now, as they say, I made a promise at the beginning, and let me give you a comparison. I'll put two columns side by side. On the left is what they say at City Hall. Mamdani in May 1926. On the right is what the housing officials of the Socialist Unity Party of Germany in East Berlin said when Erich Honecker launched his housing program in 1973. Mamdani, May 1926. Housing is a human right. East Berlin, 1973. Housing is Mamdani's right. Affordable housing is a public good, not a market commodity. There's no sense in this statement, but in East Berlin they said the same thing. Affordable housing is a public good, not a market commodity. Don't you notice how similar they are, right? Mamdani, we're protecting New York's workers from the greed of corporate landlords. East Berlin. Protecting the workers of Berlin, in this case Berlin, from the greed and exploitation of capitalist housing speculation. Mamdani, no family will be displaced from their neighborhood. East Berlin, no family will be displaced from their home. The only difference is that one said the word neighborhood and the other said the word home. Mamdani. Unprecedented measures to hold negligent landlords accountable. East Berlin. Unprecedented measures against irresponsible landlords. That is landlords. Mamdani. 100% affordable housing. East Berlin. Public housing. Here are 6 parallels, ladies and gentlemen. 53 years between them, 2 different languages. But the vocabulary turned out to be exactly the same, because they think the same way. And pay attention to what happened next in East Germany. Honecker's program promised to solve the housing problem by 1990. By 1989, when the wall fell, East Germans discovered that a third of the buildings needed major repairs. 1/6 of them were completely unfit for living. Not a single new district had been built in decades, and the housing problem remained unsolved. It was frozen, literally within the walls of decaying houses. If you've watched up to this point, you're the person for whom I'm actually making this channel. Leave a like. It helps the algorithm show the video to those who still don't understand where this road leads. And write in the comments what your strongest argument is against a rent freeze. If you don't agree with me, then write why. Debate is useful. Silence will lead to nothing. There is no silence. I live in a system that has been taken to its logical conclusion. I know what this housing freeze produces, because I grew up with the results of this housing freeze. In the USSR, residential rent was set at about 3% of a family's income. In fact, let's call it free. The official narrative was identical to Mamdani's narratives. Housing is a human right. The state protects the workers. No family will be displaced by market exploitation. Reality, communal apartments. Who knows, 3, 4, 5 families in one apartment? I lived in an apartment where 5 families lived. There was 1 bathroom, there was 1 kitchen. The only thing was there was no line for the refrigerator, because there were no refrigerators. Years-long waiting lists for a new apartment. A young family would register when they got married, and they would get the keys when their children entered university. Buildings were physically falling apart. Major repairs were constantly postponed. Stairways were dark. Elevators were broken for years. There was a black market for residence registrations and apartment exchanges because there was no legal market. There were 2 levels of hierarchy, insiders and outsiders. Some people had a good apartment inherited from their family, some didn't. The system didn't create equality. It created a frozen caste. The Soviet system is rent control taken to its logical extreme. Mamdani is offering what you might call the first step, but it's on the same path. The direction is the same. The difference is how far you go down the road before you either stop or someone stops you. And here I want you to stop and remember why New York is New York. This city is the most impressive opportunity-creating machine that humanity has ever built. 8 million people speaking 100 languages, working in 300 professions across 100 square miles. Not because some commissar assigned them that way, but because each of them chose to come there. And each one chose what to build, what to buy, whom to sell to, and from whom to rent. What and to whom to pay. That's New York. Free New York, without a rent freeze. In 10 years, that's not a disaster, it's an explosion of opportunities. If the housing market works, new construction goes up quickly. Young families find apartments, immigrants arrive, people settle in, small landlords, those very same immigrant families, in Sheepshead Bay and Sunset Park, and they invest in their homes because it makes sense. Buildings are being renovated, entrances are well lit, elevators work. Otherwise, no one will want to live there and they'll go live in another building. And here is the great paradox of freedom that Andrew Golubis explained all his life. When you stop forcing people to share, they start stealing, choosing, sharing. When you stop freezing prices yourself, prices start to fall. They start to fall on their own, because supply grows faster than demand. When you stop protecting the old-timers from the market itself becomes their ally. Their apartment increases in value, their neighborhood flourishes, their investments work. Henrik said this 2,000 years ago. Do not do to others what you do not wish for yourself. Which of those who vote for rent freeze would agree to the government setting the price at which they are required to sell their car or their watch to a stranger? The principle does not dissolve at the threshold of someone else's home. I left the USSR in 1974. I chose Los Angeles in 1986. Someone else chose New York. This choice was only possible because we were free to choose. And this freedom for the next generation, for the millions to come, for the Iranian girl and the Cuban boy who have yet to come to this city, must be preserved. It cannot be lost. We have no right to turn New York into the East Berlin of 1973. And we have no right to turn Brooklyn into a communal apartment. And don't trust a person, even if he's smiling, even if he's young, even if he speaks the right language, who promises you mercy by decree. Mercy by decree is not mercy. This is the first chapter of a very long book which I personally have already read, and many of you have too. If this video has clarified anything for you, share it, especially with your friends in New York, especially with those who are going to vote, and don't forget to subscribe, hit the bell, and like. I want to do one thing that most commenters avoid. I want to put two documents side by side. And now we're going to go deeper and deeper and deeper. This is what I was talking about. Similarities, differences. East Berlin, New York. Chapters before East Berlin became East Berlin. Chapters of New York, California, Chicago. On the left are 25 points, the National Socialist German Workers' Party. The program was written by Gottfried Feder, Anton Drexler, and Adolf Hitler. It was published on February 24, 1920 in Munich. On the right is the public platform of those who are now called Democratic Socialists in America. Bernie Sanders, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Zoran Mamdani, and Elizabeth Warren herself. Their own words. From their own campaign platforms and press releases, I'll go through with you point by point where these two documents say the same thing, or almost the same thing. Before someone closes this video, please listen for 2 more minutes. I'll explain why this comparison isn't what you're used to hearing on Twitter, and why it was actually made by a Nobel Prize winner 70 years ago. Watch till the end, and I'll tell you where the parallel breaks down. And this might be the most important part of this vision. Let's start with the facts. Many people, especially on the left, prefer to forget this. First, the full name of Hitler's party. In Russian, it sounds like this: National Socialist German Workers' Party. The word socialism in the name isn't a translation error. It's not a propaganda trick by post-war right-wingers. It's a socialist German party. Socialist. Second, Hitler himself regularly called himself a socialist in his speeches, in his book Mein Kampf, and in private conversations. In 1923 in Nuremberg, he said, "We are socialists. We are enemies of the modern capitalist system." This is not a slip of the tongue. This was a theme that was repeated for years. Enemies of capitalism. Third, Friedrich Hayek, an Austrian economist and Nobel laureate, published his most important book in 1944. It's called The Road to Serfdom. I have it. It's 3 meters away from me. I constantly reread it. He dedicated it literally to the socialists of all parties. His central thesis, brown socialism meaning Nazi socialism, red socialism meaning Soviet socialism, and also soft socialism, the British and German parties. A common economic code. They differ in whom they include in their utopia. They agree on how to build that utopia. Through prejudice, through the denial of private property, through replacing market choice with state mandates. And the fourth, German historian Götz Olli, in the book Hitler's People's State. This is from 2005. He has documented that the regime which existed from 1933 to 1945 was maintained by a massive social program, paid vacations, free health care, benefits for mothers, forgiveness of mortgage debts, families without children, state-organized tourism. This was literally socialist policy. It was financed somehow, right? By 2 things: initially by robbing the Jews, and then by robbing the occupied territories. But to a German, to an Aryan, it provided exactly the kind of package that today is called a welfare state. So I'm not using a rhetorical ploy. I'm repeating the work done by Guts Ailey, George Watson, Niall Ferguson, and many other serious, more than just serious, historians and economists. All right, let's move on to the parallels. Yes, point by point. I'll take the economic and social points of the program, the ones that deal with the economy and social policy, without touching on the racial and nationalist points for now, which I'll come back to separately, and I'll put the modern positions next to them. So, point 11 here's the German fascist one. Break interest slavery. Well, what does that mean? And as it turned out, it means abolishing unearned income. Unearned income. You earned money, put it in the bank, and earn interest. The fight against bank interest. Against speculative capital. That is, it's not clear at all what exactly you should do with the money you've earned. A modern parallel. Sanders says Wall Street is organized crime. That is, Wall Street is organized crime. Stocks, stock sales. A campaign for debt cancellation. That's Sanders. 1.7 trillion in student debt. It's the same thing, only Hitler had a different number. And the constant demonization of banks and financialization. So AOC, Ocasio-Cortez, a tax on financial transactions, that is, you received money. You're trying to sell or buy something. There are taxes on all of that. Warren, destroy big banks, because the banker is the enemy. The enemy is the creditor. So you need money. You go to someone and say, give me some money. I'll give it to you, but what's in it for me? So I take 100 and I'll pay you back 110. Yes, in a year. Okay, well then that's fine. If you do this, they have to fight you. Absolutely. The enemy is the one who lives off interest. So people will come to me and say, give me money. I know I can't get anything for it, so why give him money? To my son or brother maybe, but to anyone else? Why would I need this? I'd rather keep them under my pillow. Point 13 from the Germans. Nationalization. Literally, we demand the nationalization of all enterprises that have already been established. That is, all enterprises that exist in the world, maybe not the small workshops. A modern parallel. Medicare for all, that is, the nationalization of all private health insurance. 1.5 trillion, the market, by the way, a public option in banking. On the internet, in public utilities. I believe in public ownership of the means of production, so Vladimir Ilyich Lenin is just Trotsky, right? Warren. Mandatory worker representation on the boards of large corporations. Did they, give any money to build or make anything? Didn't they study? They were just hired to work. What kind of representation? What are you talking about? The fourth point is from the German fascists. Distribution of profits of large enterprises. Participation. Workers sharing in the profits of large enterprises. Well, if the owners want to, they will give them work. And if they don't want to, then, if you don't want to work there, go find another job. A modern parallel, please. Mandatory worker participation in management. That's both Warren and Sanders. Economic democracy. It's exactly the same tune. Point 16. Creation of a healthy middle class. Immediate municipalization of large department stores. And renting them out at low prices to small traders. So if you built a beautiful, good, expensive department store, now you have to rent it out at low prices to small traders, and then you can evict them later, right? And all government orders must be placed with small traders. What? A modern parallel. May of 26. Municipal food stores in every district of New York City. That's what he said. He is fighting against giant corporate chains. That is, against Amazon, against Walmart, against Whole Foods. In other words, what made America what it is? Made America great. They lowered prices. They provided amazing service. Made sure everything was fresh. No. Mandatory quotas for small businesses in government contracts. A tax on God knows what, which with pinpoint accuracy punishes the largest owners. That was, well, a quote. an exact match with point 16 of the German Fascist Party. Mamdani's platform, May 2016. This is not a literary parallel. It's not just similar, it's exactly the same.
Один в один.
Point 17, land reform, expropriation without compensation. Expropriation without compensation means taking property without payment. Abolishing land rent means you stop paying rent and it's simply canceled. Ban on speculation. What is speculation? Well, my wife's grandmother was sent to prison for 4 years because there was nothing to eat. She bought some fabric, made it, sewed a blouse, and went to sell it, and she sold it. She was arrested. She was sent to prison for 4 years because she was speculating. So the threads plus the fabric plus something else cost her 3 rubles, and she sold the blouse for 10 rubles. That means she was a speculator. Abolition. Ban on speculation. Land reform. Law on expropriation of land without compensation for public purposes. Abolition of land rent. Ban on all kinds of speculation, including land, the modern paradigm. Housing is a right, not a commodity. Mamdani. AOC, Sanders. Municipal land ownership as a tool against corporate landlords. Mamdani's promise to freeze rent, abolishing land rent for 1 million apartments. What? But the land belongs to me. No one will pay you anything anymore because that's slavery. Criminalization of speculative real estate investments, and so on. Free education at the expense of the state, all the same. State protection of mothers and children, public health. To steal, to take from one person in order to give to another. That's why millions of mothers in the United States of America do not legally marry in order to receive the money stolen from you. Wonderful. If this analysis was new to you, share this video. Especially with those who are used to thinking that the Nazis were right-wing. That's not my opinion. This is the work of Hayek, Guts Ali, George Watson. Subscribe and hit the bell. And give it a like. It helps. It helps the video reach those who have never heard about these comparisons. We were told and we believed that there are critically important fundamental differences between the German left, meaning the Nazis, and the American left, meaning the Democratic Party. Let's see if that's really the case. The Germans defined a citizen by blood. Aryan tribesmen had the right, everyone else did not. Modern democratic socialists in America are kind of the opposite. Hitler was building a utopia for Aryans. Mamdani is building a utopia for everyone, for immigrants from Bangladesh, for a Guatemalan refugee, for a Puerto Rican from the Bronx. It's all kind of different. Second, anti-Semitism and the Holocaust. Not just in Germany, they excluded Jews from their utopia, they exterminated them. At first, they tried to deport them, but it didn't work. They exterminated 6 million people, including my relatives. They died as a result of this policy. So as not to offend Iosif Selenik, I'll say that exactly half died because of the Germans, and the other half died because of the communists. Well, I don't know what to call them. Soviet, Russian, I don't know. He was Georgian, so God only knows. No modern democratic socialist in the U.S. is proposing or justifying the killing of Jews. Any attempt to draw an equivalence is disrespectful to the memory of the murdered and intellectually dishonest. For a long time, we thought that the main difference between the Nazis and our own leftists, well, socialists, yes, was that the Nazis were anti-Semites and racists, and ours, well, what are you talking about? Of course not. It was very convenient. It allowed us Jews to sympathize with the left. Some Jews, not all. It allowed us Jews to sympathize with those who want to bring change. It's clear that they're stealing, but they're stealing because they're good people. They wanted to take from one and give to another. Like Robin Hoods, right? Robin Hood. On one hand, Robin, and on the other hand, good. I would say Robber Good, right? On one side a bandit, on the other side a good person. And it allowed us, people from the Soviet Union, to believe that American leftists are something completely different from the kind of collectivist we were running away from. However, what we see today in America makes us reconsider this distinction, the main one, as we thought, between the two types of socialism, brown and red. I analyzed the economic program of the National Socialist Party of 1920 and the platforms of today's democratic socialists. The similarity was striking. What is happening in the American progressive wing in 24-25 makes you ask an uncomfortable question. Is anti-Semitism and racial hierarchy really what distinguishes our leftists from those leftists? Now I will break down 6 points based on facts with sources. Before we begin, one methodological note. The Anti-Defamation League, ADL, probably the most authoritative source for tracking anti-Semitism in America, recorded that in 2024 the number of anti-Semitic incidents reached a historic high, the largest single-year increase on record. The biggest increase. Where? Where the Democrats are in power and in universities. Ilhan Omar. 2019. Tweet. It's all about the Benjamins. It's a reference to $100 bills and the stereotype about Jewish money. Then there's an accusation that American Jews swear allegiance to a foreign country. Jamal Bowman calls the October 7th Hamas attack a false flag operation. He denied the documentation of the rape and murder of Israeli women and children. Zoran Mamdani. In 1924-1925, he refused to disavow the slogan, "Globalize the Intifada." He is an accomplice of the Students for Justice in Palestine chapter at Bowdoin College. He is an active supporter of the boycott, divestment, and sanctions against Israel. This is not made up. This is the public biography of the current mayor of the largest Jewish city in the world, the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance. The definition, which has been adopted by the U.S., the European Union, and 36 countries, explicitly classifies as modern forms of anti-Semitism the following. The denial of the Jewish people's right to self-determination, for example, by claiming that the very existence of the State of Israel is a racist endeavor. Therefore, according to the internationally accepted definition, a significant part of the Progressive Coalition is engaged in anti-Semitism. Every day, when it claims that Israel as a Jewish state has no right to exist. Today in America, Jews are not formally banned from being admitted to universities, as was the case under Harvard President Abbott Lowell in 1922, when an official Jewish quota was established there. When I applied to university, there was a Jewish quota of no more than 1.5%. The modern version is subtler but morally related. December 1923, congressional hearings. The presidents of Harvard, Claudine Gay, the University of Pennsylvania, Liz McGill, and MIT, Sally Kornbluth, were unable to answer the question that Stefanik asked them. Does calling for the genocide of Jews violate their university's codes of conduct? If you missed it, once again. There was a call for the genocide of Jews. She asked them, is this in accordance with their university's codes of conduct? 2 out of 3 resigned within a few months, and there, during the hearings, they couldn't answer that question. Spring of 1924, tent camps. Columbia University, UCLA, Cornell, NYU, and dozens of others. Patrols blocking access to libraries for those identified as Jewish. The patrols, of course, are made up of these students from elite American universities. 100 years ago, they openly imposed Jewish quotas under President Lowell at Harvard and Hibben at Princeton. Today, they allow the formation of a campus environment where Jewish students are subjected to harassment. They are excluded from common spaces and forced to hide their identity in order to participate in normal economic life. Joint statements by Harvard student organizations on October 8, 1923, the day after the attack, when bodies were still being recovered from the kibbutzim, blamed Israel for this attack. 30 student organizations signed. Israel is to blame. Cornell University professor Russell Rickford, on October 15, 1923, at a faculty rally, called the Hamas attack energizing. This was not done by the right wing. This was done by people who call themselves leftists. Settler colonialism, the Zionist lobby, AIPAC controls Congress, Israel forces the U.S. to fight its wars, Ilhan Omar's remark about swearing allegiance to a foreign country is a direct descendant of the same trope. Conspiracy theories about Soros work on both sides of the political spectrum, but on the left they've gained intellectual respectability. The thing is, Students for Fair Admissions vs. Harvard, the Supreme Court, July 1923. The documentation of the process showed Asian American and Jewish applicants. Harvard systematically rated them lower on the personality score. That is, Asians and Jews. This is the hidden quota, ladies and gentlemen. That's it. That's exactly what we had back in my youth, and often in yours as well. The central ideologist of anti-racism, Ibram Kendi, wrote in his article, How to Be an Anti-Racist, "The only remedy to past discrimination is present discrimination. The only remedy to present discrimination is future discrimination." This is the very logic that was embedded in the Nuremberg laws of 1935, not the Nuremberg trials, in the laws that later led to the Nuremberg trials. Current group discrimination is justified to correct historical group grievances. Jews offended Germans for 300 years, and now Germans will offend Jews for that. Kill them. The target group is different now, almost different. White people and Jews are still the same, and the structural logic and the target is still the same. It's not that the supporters of DAI want genocide. The point is that once society accepts the principle that the state and its institutions should treat people based on their assigned group identity, the question of which groups are given advantages and which are deprived of rights becomes a matter of political power, not principle. If you agree with what we just discussed, write the word "C" in the comments. If you don't agree, write "don't see," and give your argument. I read every comment at least once. 2 or 3 hours after the video is released, I go through the channel, and I respect disagreement that's based on facts or logic. Or maybe on facts and logic or something else. A closed section, $4 a month, there I'll break down the next step of this trend. What will happen if this logic is applied in the government policy of the next Democratic president, so that this separate analysis doesn't turn into a caricature? I have to say that in America in 2026, there is no state machine of mass murder. There are no camps, no Kristallnacht organized from the White House. Jews in America fully participate in elite life. They hold top positions, run the largest companies, and sit on the Supreme Court. Antisemitism in 2026 is not what people thought. It's a climate, not a state-sponsored genocide. The violence is verbal for now, not physical. But in Russia, mostly, it always starts small. Well, it's heading in that direction. The principle that a person is first and foremost a member of a group, not an individual, is a principle that has no built-in restraint. The volume can be turned up. Violence can be redirected. The lesson of the 20th century is that the one who governs, who sets this principle, does not control what will be done with it later. None of those who vote for a system of racial preferences would accept having that system of preferences used against their own child when applying to a university. None of those who vote for BDS would agree for the world to boycott their country, their great-grandfather's country. A principle does not dissolve at someone else's doorstep. I want you to take the following with you. The lesson is not to be afraid. The lesson is to recognize the music early from the very beginning, to be able to make a diagnosis. As the current generation of Soviet Jews, Cuban exiles, Vietnamese refugees, and Hungarians of 1956 can, we have heard this music before. You have to be able to recognize it, even when it's played in another language, on different instruments. But the music is the same. And most importantly, we know exactly what happens after the second part. And because we know it, we have an advantage, which our grandparents' generation didn't have in 1933. We can describe what's happening at an early stage calmly, with arguments, with sources, and with the experience of 100 million surviving relatives behind us. America in 1926 is not Germany in 1933, and in many ways that's exactly because we're here. We come from systems that have already gone down this path. We tell Americans gently, consistently, without hysteria, what we see, what we recognize, and what we will try not to let happen again. Maybe the most important role of our generation of immigrants in this country is not just to become rich, to live well, not just to send our children to Harvard, but to get vaccinated, to recognize the virus by its first symptom and quietly, calmly, firmly say, I have already seen this. Let's not repeat this. Free America is a country where every person is a person, not just part of a collective, not a category, not a color, not a group, not privileged, not marginalized, a person with the right to choose for themselves. With Guillory at the foundation, with Galambas in the structure, with Berdyaev as a reminder, America is America. It's in our hands, it's our work for the next 10 years. Until next time.